Hi everyone, welcome to this research design or methodology lecture series which form a part of our broad international relations lecture series. First of all, let me tell you why this lecture is different from other available lectures or literature and why it's very useful for you. What I'm going to do here is before getting into the concepts of social science research and its fundamentals, I would like to clarify a few things for you so that you will have a clear picture. In this research design series, we are not repeating the available information, but number one, explaining you from a different angle, all right? Practical and real world situation. And number two, showing you real examples of the articles that are published in highly regarded international journals. Here I distinguish social science research writing into two parts. First, its basic principles and guidelines, such as its concepts or methods, all right, which in general I put it as principle. And number two is strategy. All right. So remember, one is principle and two is strategy. It's important not to mix these two, but be mindful of their importance. You need both of them equally. All right. For example, starting your writing with a gap in the existing studies and then to design a certain method to conduct research uh, is is the basic principle. What kind of studies to follow, or but then what kind of methods to apply? This is your strategy to succeed, meaning your strategy is critical so that your peers, your professors will accept your idea, your peers in your field endorse your idea. All right. uh, Please keep that in mind that there are several ways of writing research papers. There are different traditions of doing research. There is the so-called research paradigm. There are different preferences. So your goal is not only to follow certain systematic procedure to do research, but also to fit into the research environment you are in. Some follow quantitative method, the numerical method, uh, because it's what they believe in. They believe it as a scientific method, all right? So they are called positivist in our social science term. And there are others who believe that numerical analysis is not apt to explain social phenomena. Therefore, they follow or they believe in qualitative methods. So we call them call it interpretivist tradition. It's a classical type research. So, but the debate is there. We're not getting into that debate right now. In our context, for example, if your professor does not want any statistical analysis or any, I mean, numerical data, but want you to look at certain issue and explain it through the explanation of certain observed pattern in the world society and vice versa, or you are asked to explain any particular case or make a comparison between some cases, then it is definitely your duty to follow accordingly. Otherwise, your work will not be accepted or you simply cannot continue. Another example, even if you are interested in some particular theoretical perspectives, those perspectives should be timely also, meaning your theory was in fashion a decade ago, and then now scholars in your field are generally not interested in what you're arguing. Then you better forget your own choice and move on with what others suggest. So you see, even in principle, you are correct. You are picking up certain theories and you're applying valid methods to do some research, but here you are not having any strategy, so it doesn't work anyway. So those who are in the IR scholarship and have realist dominated ideas and beliefs, and then you go to a professor or approach a journal who dislike realism and encourage other approaches such as constructivism, then again you are not good at strategy. Even though you are following social science standard procedure, it's not going to work. So the next thing I want to highlight is first your strength. First step I would say is to know your own strength and interest in terms of what methodology you think you will be able to master. If you are thinking of preparing some data and doing some data analysis by using some statistical tools, you know how to operate some statistical softwares, or you have good commands on some statistical formulas, or you think you can learn them quickly even though at this moment you don't know, that's okay. And that's good that you should go for these quantitative methods. However, if you are the opposite type, then forget about such methods. Do not waste much time reading quantitative papers. All right, so then the next step for you will be then check if you will be interested in some other qualitative methodology like ethnographic methodology, for instance. If you have in mind that some particular region or area to do some research, that you want to do field work there, if it's your own place, by the way, that you know well, you explain certain phenomenon of your own society by being a part of it under certain frame of your own beliefs and values. Uh, I suggest you check the courses at your institutions. They usually offer several methodology or research design classes. Do not miss them, they are crucial for you. Otherwise, you will waste your time trying for wrong mentors with wrong ideas. Even if you have a super idea, it will not work if you are not talking to somebody relevant. Just one note here. What I'm explaining here, it could be that it's not relevant to all of you. It depends on what kind of institutions you are in, what kind of PhD program you are in, or how you get into a PhD program in the first place, and so on. All right, coming back to our point, if you think you're not doing any field work in particular, you want to just read secondary information, newspapers, books, articles, or you might have some distance interviews with relevant people or experts to understand certain issues profoundly, then you choose to simply describe certain phenomenon underpinned by some theoretical perspectives. Here you simply give descriptions and make them fit into a certain theoretical perspective. It's about argument, of course. All right, to a certain extent, every article gives description, so we need description as well. Otherwise, we cannot convincingly explain. Uh, and your arguments have to be coherent anyway, and not just focus on descriptions of history or some incidents. You need your arguments. Otherwise, you see, your mentor will say, I can read Wikipedia for all this information. What's your input? So be careful. You have to catch and follow a line of academic discourse all along throughout in your paper. Academic discourse means academic debate on that particular pattern or theory that you're looking into. All right, what scholars have said what on that. Uh, and then you should lay out your plans clearly. Are you getting into a certain theoretical debate and you're bringing certain cases to support your argument, or you are just borrowing some theoretical frameworks and concepts from other scholars and doing case studies under those frameworks broadly? So you shouldn't mix them, all right? We don't want any vague words or plans. Everything has to be clear cut. And after you have gone through all this, what I have explained here, then you arrive at the literature review phase. All right, this is critical. Uh, the point of departure for you is the literature review. I repeat, the literature review. I would put that this is where a life of research paper or dissertation comes into being. Okay, literature review. I have seen many who think that after laying out your research question, methods, plans, as a section they want to put literature review. That is totally false. And you cannot even imagine doing a PhD or even a good master paper without starting with literature review. All right. But what is literature review? Where to find literature? How to recognize it? To simply put, the literature review is nothing but an academic discourse or debate in the field that you are in or you want to do research in. Remember that you are not the first person to do the research. There are plenty of them out there who also have already done or doing research in the same field. And in fact, not only the same field, it might be that they have already given the answer for what you want to research. So basically, you follow those studies. And do not forget to have big names. I mean, start with big scholars of that field, of your field. The theory you want to apply, all right? So read what they have to say, what theory they are talking about or developing, how far they have done research in some particular area, in what kind of domains they are doing research, what kind of methodology they are applying. So you have to read, understand, and formulate these arguments, these literature in your own words, right? I repeat, in your own words. You have to follow certain procedure. Write in your own words. But when you are writing others' ideas, cite them, give references. And if you are using the same phrases and expressions, use quotes. But also remember, you are not copying the ideas in your own words. It has to be your own paper. It's your own argument. It is just that you are starting your argument, stepping on these works already done, and now building upon their arguments. All right. I mean, in terms of citation and references, there are other materials available. I'm just quickly touching upon this for you right now. So doing that, you'll find out what angle could you give to your own paper so that other available studies in a way do not convincingly explain it. All right. Or there are studies who directly do not deal with it. Some might have touched upon it but not fully elaborated. So you should search for any such loopholes, gaps. Okay. If there's a theory, for instance, but you find out there is not enough case studies to support that theory. So that's one gap you have found. Or some big scholars in the debate is asking for some particular case study, right? Or for some new methodological approach. So that's a gap for you. For instance, there are case studies to support the theory, but it would also be important to see cross-nationally, meaning is this theory, really travel across several nations? Will it be right or not? All right. So this is one. This theory will explain even in other cases or not. So this is another way to find the gap. Or they say, okay, we know now certain phenomenon works, we know how it works, but the question comes then why it works or why it doesn't work. For instance, take democracy. If one scholar explains, all right, how democracies work in Europe, all right, then you might look into Africa and Asia, then might be how democracies work in Africa and Asia. It might be similar or it might be different. That's one question that you can do research. Or if it's already well explained, across regions that how democracies work, then the question might remains that why democracies work and why democracies do not work. Okay, so this is another ground for you to make research. So this is the way how you find your own ground. This is the literature, the importance of literature review and finding research gaps. So this is the key to start a new research. And however, your gap, your claim should be convincing to your peers. You should demonstrate that you have understood well the literature and what you are planning is not really answered already. Okay, so these are the fundamentals. You see, remember that principles and guidelines part. But how about strategy here? If you have found a gap, all right, but it should be something that develops the field further or in a constructive, in a positive way. If not, then although you're right, your peers would not be interested in your paper. So be careful again. It might be that you think you're arguing, what you're arguing is in fact falling into some other research paradigms or in some other rival theories. Okay, so then this is not a good strategy. Now, after you figured out about literature review and you have found the gap, the next thing I want to discuss is the structure, the sequence, how you in fact develop a certain paper. Okay, such as what do you have to write first? Research question, and then the literature review, and then the theory, and so on. Some professors particularly ask you to put your research question first, but others not. Okay, so but don't worry, it's not always similar. If you don't review the literature, then how come you know the research question? So if you see, even if you write the research question before, it's understood that you have already done some research. Okay, so you have already found a certain gap in the literature. So you see, the process is not that you go on exploring really unknown territory. You are not doing that. I mean, you write a question and then you go on exploring that the answer. No, by convention, you first do some research already and then come back to your first paragraph and start following the procedure. What, why to write first? All right. I especially would want you to start your paper with a research problem. Mhm. Or statement of the problem or problem statement. What are they? That is, they are that gap in the literature review that we were talking about. Okay, so you start with slightly giving readers the context and arriving at that point of gap. Then you can go on elaborating your research question, and then you can go on detail over your literature, and then you move on to hypothesis formulation, then your theoretical or conceptual framework depending on what frame you are giving to your study, and then you explain your research design, either it's qualitative or quantitative, and then more details on what exactly the design is, what are your sources, and so on. If you are doing a thesis, master or PhD, it would be reasonable or even desirable that you put all the headings like literature review, theories, methods, research problems, and all that. Okay, I mean, basically, it all they all come under your introduction chapter, and then you go chapter by chapter writing your monograph, your dissertation. All right. There are different standards and preferences on page numbers, length of the dissertation, and all that. But there's another one. It's called so-called cumulative PhD. For instance, you do not write a dissertation of over 200 pages on one topic or I mean one research question, but write separate articles. Let's say four to complete your dissertation. All right. So just like you see the articles in journals between each article between 20 to 30 pages. You do not write all the headings and subheadings of research problem, literature review, method, theory, etc. There are different ways in doing that, right? There are professors, journal editors, or let's say peer reviewers who basically check the quality of the paper, don't like having separately putting the basic things. For instance, some professors elaborate hypotheses by saying hypothesis 1, 2, and so on, but some professors think that that's too basic. Advanced papers or experienced scholars do not have to mention every basic element like that. They're already embedded in their writings. So there are different preferences also. You see, this is a part of your strategy. Okay, then what you need, another important element in your paper, is theoretical framework or conceptual framework. In between your research design section and the previous elements here I discussed, you need to prepare a frame for your study, which is the major part of your study. Some scholars combine this together with literature review, research problem, and the research question and hypothesis. Some do it separately. It's about making your base on the available literature and then combining several other insights from other disciplines to lay out certain framework for your study. Okay, so that's, in most cases you might need to borrow from other fields or disciplines. In terms of research design, in the next following lectures with examples, we'll have a thorough discussions on it. In terms of research design, what you keep in mind is that your idea and the way you do your research, these things keep repeating in every section. It's just that you need to focus and elaborate a bit more on one factor while touching upon another under every section. Okay. So here in research design, you explain either qualitative or quantitative. You give all the details and you justify why you have uh, done this kind of research design, why your research design and your methods would produce a useful insight. Okay, the example we discussed earlier, like you could say there are only cross-national studies, so I want to do case study, or vice versa. Okay, if it's a qualitative research, then you want to explain more on your concepts and frames, on your insights you have combined. If it's quantitative research, you should be explaining your causal model, your frame, your variables, I mean the factors that make your model. So you will see all this very clearly, as I said, in the next following lectures. In terms of research design, there's one thing you should keep in mind as a basic rule or our principle, remember, that is the unit level or level of analysis. All right. So what are the level of analysis you should make sure? Uh, just to give you an example, if you are looking at domestic politics, the societal level, all right, so there's the domestic level is your unit of analysis. If you look at international level, like interstate relationship, so then your level is the relationship between states at international level. Or if you are looking at the individual level, all right, at the people's level, at the leaders level, so that's your one unit. So you have to be very clear, and you can't just easily switch between labels in social science research. So you have to, your research questions, your theories, your model has to be clear about what unit of analysis you're staying at. Okay, you again, about the unit of analysis we will have more discussions in our following lectures. And if it's quantitative analysis, there are some other factors you have to take care of, such as replicability, reliability, validity. Okay, so replicability of your data. If you have numerical data and you have certain mathematical method, your data and methods should be easily accessed by other scholars. They should be able to repeat them, and they should be getting the same results out of your data and methods. So that's the replicability. And there's another thing called validity, which is a scale that you use for measurement. All right, so that scale should be adequately measuring your concept. For instance, when you say poor and you are using the scale of income, to judge if anybody is poor or not. But how about people who have lots of properties but no visible income? Then there will be the problem with this scale. So this is the validity problem. And the third one is reliability. Okay, the reliability is that there should be no measurement errors. Your measurement should be consistent with true scores. All right, so these things you have to keep in mind. Now, after the research design, in general, I want to note few things here. I want you to keep them in mind. There is a difference, you see, between information or fact and argument or thesis. A scientific paper is about argument, not about facts. But definitely you need facts to support your arguments. If you have brought new information that are not already available, that's good. But that you have to use in your argument. Don't think that you brought new information, now you have the degree or title, whatever. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. To give you an instance, a colleague of mine once came to me and recounted her problem. Because every time she would go to her professor with new information that she brought in from the field or from the library, her professor would say that this was not the way you do research. So she was totally confused. So you see, finding new information, doing research on Google or finding new information in the library is not research unless you are contributing to a certain knowledge field. You need a certain knowledge base before you search information and facts. Otherwise, you will be writing a newspaper piece or some Wikipedia style information, which in itself is a research but not our valid scientific social science research. Similarly, don't give your intuitive feelings and opinions, but logical arguments. And arguments and information should have references. They should not be just ad hoc type sentences. I mean, you just can't give some controversial arguments or thoughts but without any valid references or facts. They are not accepted. In terms of the data collection procedure, details on interviews about who and how, these depend on what kind of research you are doing. Mostly in survey, you obviously need that, but you don't see that on articles in the IR field. Therefore, you should also check with your peers. You should check relevant academic outlets, check what they are doing. Then you will have a very good idea what you should be doing. And good news, there are softwares that can help you organize your reference materials. They do automatic generation of bibliography. They are useful and they save a lot of your time. So I recommend you, when you start your paper, even if you can do manually, try these softwares. Eventually you will know the importance. And in the next two lectures, I explain you in details about the research design in quantitative and qualitative methodology using numbers and the words. I have used two articles from highly regarded international relations journals and screened them one by one of the content so that you will have a clear idea for advancing on your own project. Meanwhile, I recommend you to read more materials on research design and methodology, reflect on them, try read more research papers. In that way, you will develop your skills to read, understand, and write scientific papers. So see you in the next lectures.